Thank you very much and welcome to 9 Steps to Future-Proofing Your Warehouse. We are in episode 6 now. My name is Daniel Mortimer. I'm the event director of CMAT Australia, who's hosting these webinars for you. Hosting with our partners, Fuzzy Logics, who will be joining us again today with Jeffrey and Baz. And we'll also this week be joined by our special guest from Dematic, Paz, who will be talking you through picking solutions. So without further ado, as we do every week, Jeff will be giving us an introduction into picking as a good overview, and then we'll pass over to Paz for his insights. So if I just share my screen for you, Jeff, we can take it away.
Thanks, Dan. And hello and welcome back to session number 6 of our 9-part journey to a future-proof warehouse. It's great to have you join us for another week running. It's interesting to think that we're now 2/3 of the way on our journey, and we're only just getting to one of the hottest topics in warehousing, picking. And that's why I've named it Making the Magic Happen. So we'll go into slide 1. Taking a look, the slide before, please. Taking a look on where we are on our 9-part journey to a future-proof warehouse, the 6th step is designing, or should I say engineering, the optimal picking process for your order fulfillment operation. This week, we'll take a quick look at the logistics and data requirements of this functional process, and then I'll be passing on to Paz from Dematic, who will take us into the current market trends and technology which is being used to meet these changing market conditions. The common theme across today's session will be optimizing picking productivity to achieve the ultimate customer experience. We'll go to the next slide, please. So let's get started. Picking is the 5th functional process we're looking at in our series, and it refers to the physical act of picking product from a pick face driven by your outbound dispatch requirements. Now, if you remember last session, we looked at replenishment and we identified the importance of having the right pick face for every product, as this impacts your picking. Not only do some SKU need to have a different type of pick face due to their physical kind of nature, but also because of their throughput and velocity. And then on top of that, you need to think of different units of measure by which an individual SKU can be picked. For example, pallets, full case, and split case are commonly the 3 types of pick faces, which may be required for any individual SKU. For this reason, when looking for improvement, we always recommend looking at your order line data and converting that to pick line data. For example, one order line could generate a pallet pick, a case pick, and a split case pick. That's 3 pick lines. And it's important you understand those volumes so that then you can generate the right kind of order fulfillment process and design the right order fulfillment process for your business. So getting back to the program. Every week, we equip ourselves with our best practice tips, and this week is for picking. So what are we looking to do? Minimize unnecessary travel and touches. Picking can be anywhere from 40 to 75% of the total labor hours allocated to order fulfillment. As such, it naturally gets the most focus. And at the end of the day, it's all about reducing walking and idle time. The right pick face for each product. It's important that we analyze the velocity, seasonality, and units of measure to ensure you're picking the right product from the right location and only visiting it the amount of times you need to. Don't forget about replenishment here. Removing non-value adding activities is very important. We've already talked about walking, which is arguably the biggest non-value added activity in traditional picking, but we also want to look out for additional opportunities to reduce unnecessary touches when we're at the pick face, when we're transferring to our picking unit loads, and also when and if we have to do an outsort process. Make sure you understand the upstream and downstream processes which are required to facilitate your picking process, and see how you can kind of build or engineer a picking operation to optimize those. And finally, we use technology to increase productivity. Technology is a true enabler of increased productivity, and it's the best way for you to take order picking by the horns to transform your outbound operation. And as always, it starts with logistics. We'll go to the next slide, please. As we've already mentioned, most traditional pick methods are heavily dependent on the walking or travel time it takes to cycle through the pick face to pick an order. So it's no surprise that out of the 3 physical movements required for the picking process, 2 of them are travel. So as we can see on the page, the 3 types of physical movements are traveling to the pick face. So this is usually referred to as the pick path. And it's generated by how your pick assignments are delivered to the picker. And you're usually coming up with some kind of unit load, which you carry with you along the pick face to pick the order onto. That's the second step, transferring what you've picked onto the picking ULD. So, this is where we see things like trolleys or picking to a pallet. You're going to be transferring what you're picking onto some kind of unit load that's going to facilitate the movement to the third step, which is traveling back to dispatch. And sometimes this step can involve an outsort process. I feel like dispatch and picking are always kind of fighting as to whose labor the outsort process belongs to, but it's important not to forget it. So ideally, we look to reduce walking to a minimum, and the best way to do this is by engineering your pick path based on velocity to increase your hit density. Hit density, for those that don't know, is how many hits per location visit or per meter walked. And therefore, by increasing your hit density, you increase your productivity. We need to move away from our traditional person-to-goods operations, where a person has to walk the whole pick face, as we've described already, to a goods-to-person system, which is where the pick face, using mechanization, robotics, automation, the pick face is cycled to the picker. So the picker reduces the amount of movement they need to do, and they just focus on the second process, which is transferring from the pick face. It can be a tote, it can be lots of different things, to the actual, to the order, the outbound order. So we want to move from person to goods to person. We'll go to the next slide, please. Good systems are always an integral part of a future-proof operation. Every week, we've looked at what the data requirements are to optimize your operation. An optimized picking process is facilitated by the following system-enabled processes. Replenishment. We've discussed replenishment last week, and we can't forget that picking and replenishment are inextricably linked. So much so that you actually need to generate a pick for your replenishment. So you can't forget about how important replenishment is to your pick face selection and your pick technology selection as well. Secondly, wave management. This refers to the ability to optimize the way you perform your work within your operation based on your outbound profile. Waving is the act of releasing work to your order fulfillment system in a controlled manner. Controlling how work is released can allow you to treat different orders differently and increase productivity. One of the ways we always recommend is batch picking single line orders and picking them directly into their shipping unit where possible. This can save you a lot of double handling and increase your productivity quite dramatically for that volume of orders, which we all know single line orders are increasing thanks to online commerce. Having the ability to control these orders allows control, and control enables optimization. We'll talk a little bit more about waving and order fulfillment in the next slide, but let's just talk about order fulfillment as well. Finally, system-driven order fulfillment should drive picking activities and facilitate the logical confirmation process for picking. This is all about executing the pick in an optimized manner, and mobility technology can play a big part here. We should always be careful to consider the type of order fulfillment technology employed for each different pick face type. For example, voice picking can help increase productivity in many scenarios. However, I have also seen it reduce productivity when employed incorrectly in goods-to-person systems, where visual cues have been proven to provide maximum productivity. So what are the different types of picking? Let's go to our second last slide. So we've got 6 key types of picking that we usually refer to, and I'll just get through them so that everyone's aware of them. So discrete picking, it's the traditional picking that we all know of. You walk the pick face to pick an individual order. It's the most inefficient types of picking for a lot of the time, but it can make sense if you're picking large orders. If you're picking a whole pallet or two, you take those pallets with you on the pick face and you build the pallet. It's actually an efficient way of picking. So it always depends on your order profile, of course. Batch picking refers to walking the pick face once to pick across multiple orders, but then requires an outsort so that you can go back to having a discrete order for packing. So you can't forget that you need to have an outsort process, which does add labor as well. Now, we touched on previously the single line orders. Single line, single unit is more specifically a type of batch picking that we always consider low-hanging fruit. It's very good because every single item inside your batch pick, which is a big mixed tub or unit load of some sort of lots of different items, every single item in that order pick is an individual order. So the outsort process is not required. You should be able to pack directly from a single line, single unit pick. Next, we have cluster picking, which is walking the pick face to pick multiple discrete orders. Now, again, it sounds like common sense, but a lot of systems do not actually facilitate that natively, and it's worth exploring opportunities to walk the pick face, still maintain your orders discreetly. As you can see on the pictures that we're showing on the page, we've got trolleys, and this is where trolleys can really add a lot of value. And then finally, we've also got zone picking, which refers to segmenting your warehouse into different zones and keeping labor within these zones so that they're not walking across the whole warehouse. And this is also known to increase productivity and is usually facilitated by routing conveyors. And then finally, we have wave picking. Now, it's not necessarily a different type of picking, and it's not exclusive to the other types that we've seen, but it's about how you control your picking. And that's what we touched on that previously a little bit. But wave picking it's a methodology which allows you to drive your order fulfillment based on your outbound dispatch requirements. Wave picking is contrasted by a growing trend in waveless picking for e-fulfillment these days, where orders are automatically downloaded into order fulfillment system and picked as you go. And there's pros and cons for both. So your operational profile usually tells you which way to go here. So now we'll wrap up. Future-proofing your picking operation is all about building business cases for improvement by understanding your current operation and determining how technology could improve your productivity. Choosing the right pick face, playing to the strengths of your operational profile, and understanding how you can manage the waving of your work in order to reduce non-value-adding activities and reduce your overall fulfillment costs are key. Remember, not all touches are created equal. Pick smarter, not harder. Now we'll hear more about the market trends and technology from Paz. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. That was a really good overview and a great segue into what I'm talking about, because I'm excited at the fact that I get to zoom into the technology and the automation that encompasses a lot of what Jeffrey just spoke about. Next slide, please. So over the next 20 minutes, I'm just going to quickly cover the technology and the automation that is driving order fulfillment. But before I do so, I just wanted to set the landscape a little bit and just talk about the consumer expectations, because it's about marrying the technology and the automation to meeting those expectations and the increasing expectations of our consumers. So I'll cover that landscape and then finish up with, choosing the right partner, being an early adopter. How do you do it? How do you make sure that you're successful if you're going to take on technology and automation? So next slide, please. At the risk of giving away my age, I do remember when milk deliveries were being made to home, and mum and dad used to leave some money in the post box or in the electrical box. So yes, that was a home delivery service many decades ago. We then saw the emergence of the corner store and the grocery store and the little corner supermarket, and you'd go shopping with your parents and buy your weekly or sometimes more often than weekly groceries. Then we saw the emergence of the big super mall or the shopping centres, and to some extent many of those still exist today. But the emergence of the mall with lots and lots of options and lots of choices of retailers, etc. And then following on from that, we've started to see over the last decade or so the emergence of the more specialized metro-style retail store, especially in the grocery area, largely specialized towards a particular demographic in a particular region. And now we've done the full circle back to home delivery, online grocery. So, I often ask myself the question, does history repeat itself? But let's move on. Next slide, please. In terms of just setting some landscape, we all know about the growth in e-commerce, and the chart on the left shows the steady growth of online retail or e-commerce as a percentage of general retail sales over the last 5 to 6 years. So it's been growing steadily, sitting at around about the, just over the 7% mark, which puts us at around the bottom of the top third of the civilized world in terms of our percentage of retail sales that online sales represent. And I was very determined not to talk too much about COVID during this presentation because you're all being bombarded with it. But the chart on the right shows very clearly the acceleration of that growth that COVID has caused. And just some key takeaways is that the growth was up 80% year on year in just the 8 weeks since the COVID-19 pandemic was declared a pandemic by the WHO. April 2020 saw 200,000 new shoppers in the online space. The previous forecast had seen the prediction to hit about 16 to 18% by 2025. And now the current prediction is it will be at 15% by the end of 2020. So that acceleration of that uptake of online sales is evident. And we've read a lot about it in the media. But just to set the scene, the rest of this presentation, I'm focusing on e-commerce. And Jeffrey covered a range of sort of picking. He covered, cases and pallets and eaches. With the focus on e-commerce, I'm going to focus on each picking, the picking of units, the order fulfillment of multiple different individual products to form an order, either for an end consumer or for someone to pick up at a click and collect, and I'll talk about that. So next slide, please. What really is interesting, and even though this slide is about 3 years old, the trends are remaining fairly consistent. And whilst free delivery has been and continues to be very, very important, speed is becoming more important. And it's really interesting that the evolution of those two variables in online picking. So people are not going to pay for delivery. That's becoming an absolute given. But what's emerging is that they're not going to pay even though they're expecting it to arrive same day or early the next day. So once upon a time, you'll get it for free. It's going to arrive in the next few days or in the next week. That time window is contracting significantly. And what we're seeing is that the consumer is expecting a very tight delivery window, a very fast delivery window, and by the way, they're not going to pay for it. And all the other variables listed on this chart that online grocery does deliver equally apply in the different weightings that you see. Next slide, please. So kind of in summary, the consumer has all the power. Let's just not lose sight of that fact. So if retailers want to flourish in this environment, it's about meeting those consumer expectations. Once upon a time, the power was with the wholesalers and the retailers because people used to get it out of the ground, process it, manufacture it, turn it into a good that a wholesaler bought. The wholesaler then sold it to a retailer, and the retailer then sold it to an end consumer. And along that path, margin was on margin was on margin, and the consumer would pay what they paid. Well, things have changed. The consumer has all the power. They get the opportunity to look at pricing on their phone, on a tablet, from their home computer. It's instantaneous information. It's instantaneous comparison. So they know what they want. They know where they want it. They know when they want it. And they're pretty confident they know exactly how much they should be paying for it. So if you're too expensive, they're going to go get it somewhere else. So in terms of setting the landscape, again, if you as a retailer, as a business want to flourish in this environment, you've got to meet these demands. Next slide, please. So how is automation transforming all of that? And how does automation and technology give you that competitive edge? Next slide, please. So Jeffrey touched on this, and I'm repeating a slide that's been around for a little while in our business, but effectively repeating some of the commentary that Jeff put forward. Travel is by far the biggest part of the order fulfillment task in manual warehousing, and to some extent, even in semi-automated warehousing, which I call there the low to mid-level. So pickers do a lot of travel to fulfill an order, and the different picking methodologies and techniques that Jeffrey spoke about address quite a lot of that through batching, clustering, waving. There's a lot of things you can do outside of the application of direct technology and automation that can help minimize that travel. But it really is no surprise that when we talk about technology and automation, it really is about attacking the travel component of the order fulfillment task. Now, there are other non-value added tasks that are shown on this pie. And again, technology helps deal with a lot of those as well. And so we allow the picker to focus on the green part of the pie, which is the bit that adds the most value in terms of the operation. And we need the green part of the pie to be the biggest part of the pie, 80, 90% of that. So we have a lot of examples, and some of which, again, were covered by Jeffrey, manual and semi-automated pick solutions. The next few slides, I'm going to focus on high automation. We call it goods to person, and there's various variants of goods to person available. I'm going to show some videos, and we're going to talk about how goods to person works and what it can do for an operation. So I'll start with the next slide, please, Daniel, which is a video of the toll. Oh, there's an echo. So is the video showing? Oops, no, go back, please, Daniel. Thank you for this video. Okay, can everyone still hear me? Yeah. So this is a video of the Toll Preston's facility in Sydney. So this is a goods to person system. You're looking at a run of what we call one-to-one pick stations. And this is where an operator is standing at that pick station and they're picking product that is delivered to them on the tote on the right, and they're picking it into an order carton on the left. So the totes are delivered, the order cartons are delivered, the operator doesn't do any travel, the operator stands there doing nothing but picking. So in terms of referencing back to that pie chart, their time is occupied 80 to 90% of doing the green part, the picking part. So the system is backed by a very large storage system that stores and retrieves those product totes. It's a Dematic's multi-shuttle engine, storing a couple of 100,000 totes of product and bringing them out to the pick stations as required in a particular sequence to fulfill the order. Okay. Next slide, please. Another variant to goods to person technology is what we call the auto store system. It's another part of Dematic's portfolio of solutions. The auto store system is a grid of totes stacked vertically. You'll see that in a couple of seconds from now. But effectively, it's the methodology is similar to what I just described. It's a storage engine storing totes of product and then bringing those products out to a pick station where an operator picks individual units out of those totes to assemble a completed order. The beauty of the auto store system is that it's density. So whereby the previous video showed a system that is geared towards providing higher throughput systems, this particular solution is geared towards providing much higher density goods to person type methodology. So it's made up of a grid that stores totes up to 16 totes high. What happens is that the fast movers tend to migrate to the top of that grid because they're the ones that are most often accessed. The robots on top do the picking of those totes or the accessing of those totes through, riding around on the grid, shuffling the ones above to get to a tote below. And as I said before, the faster movers tend to migrate to the top and then delivering that tote to a pick station, as you see on the screen right now, where the operator can do what they need to do to pick the order, possibly some value add, etc. Any range of conveyor pick stations or different types of pick stations can be applied to the solution, and can be intermingled into a hybrid solution with this type of density. So I've shown you a couple of variants, a multi-shuttle based variant with a one-to-one pick station, an auto store based variant that provides a lot higher storage density and a lot more flexibility around building and building columns. But both of these bring the product out to an operator for picking. So the obvious question is, next slide please, Daniel, when does it start to make sense to eliminate the operator and introduce robotic picking. So the video that's playing now on the screen, I hope. Yep. Okay. So this is the robotic each pick cell. So this is effectively now replacing the human picker with a robotic cell. What you see here is an articulated robotic arm with a very sophisticated vision system. And that's where all the smarts is. It's in the vision system above in the software that is able to identify an individual product inside a tote, be able to pick it, and then assemble the order. So we can deliver different products to the robot as it needs to pick different products and put those different products into an order tote or an order carton, as the case may be. As I said, the robotic technology itself in terms of the arm is fairly well advanced. There's a lot of work going on gripper technology, the different types of grippers for different types of product profiles, but the smarts very much resides in the software and the vision system that sits behind it that looks and digitizes the image and determines the product to pick and then place that product into a tote. Again, a number of variables can influence the performance of a robotic cell. Can we pick the product and then drop it into an order tote, or do we need to pick and place it? Is it a bottle that breaks? Is it a carton of pharmaceuticals, et cetera, et cetera? And there's a lot of science and mathematics that goes into determining the best layout, the best way that the robot works, the choice of gripper, the rates that you will get based on that product profile, et cetera. And so, again, it's an ROI question. So thanks, Daniel. You've transitioned to the next slide. When I was contemplating the content of this presentation, I didn't feel I could do the presentation justice if I didn't talk a little bit about micro-fulfillment. It is a buzzword at the moment going around the industry. What does it mean? And what do we mean? And what is our understanding of it? I'm going to talk about micro-fulfillment in the context of grocery at the moment because that's where it's getting the most airplay. But it's certainly my personal and Dematic's view that micro-fulfillment will proliferate into general retail imminently. It's going to make its way in across the supply chain in terms of online retail. But with respect to grocery, historical and traditional methods of picking grocery orders were that grocery retailers would build a distribution center, the picture on the left, sometimes referred to as a customer fulfillment center, fulfilling online orders and delivering those online orders to a very wide radius of consumers around that distribution center. Sometimes a DC picks the orders and delivers them to stores for click and collect purposes, but largely speaking, that methodology is centered on picking the orders within a large distribution center. Often, retailers have chosen to do the online picking in store, inside a public store. Sometimes they close it to the public, and it's called a dark store, but let's just focus on the picking in store. Many of you online today would have probably encountered this. If you do the grocery shopping, you may have gone to a supermarket where you see an online picker. They're pretty visible. They're usually walking around with a big trolley of totes, like the picture on the bottom right. So they're hard to miss, but they're picking, they're your personal shopper, so to speak, and they're picking online orders. Again, either for click and collect purposes to be picked up later or for going into a delivery van. So next slide, please, Daniel. Micro-fulfillment is about putting in automation that deals with two things. One is putting in automation at the site of picking. So we can have this typically in the back of a store or adjacent to store, but typically they will be around urban areas. And we're not talking about one or two of these, as would be the case with a centralized DC. We're talking about potentially dozens of these. And the second thing that it deals with is the last mile. So now we can put one of these and offer extremely fast and tight delivery windows. I'm talking about an hour or two to a tight radius around each of these micro-fulfillment centers. So if you've got one of these in the back of a store in suburb A and another one in suburb B, and those suburbs are 5 kilometers apart, then you're dealing with a 2.5 kilometer radius that each of those micro-fulfillment centers can service, and therefore allowing the retailer, and again, in the context of grocery, but undoubtedly this will make its way everywhere else, allowing the retailer to provide really fast and tight windows of delivery. Typically, a micro-fulfillment system, at least in the grocery space, like you see on the screen now, will be comprised of a couple of aisles of ambient storage, maybe one aisle of refrigerated storage. There may be a manual pick area that may also have a freezer area in the back of the store, if space permits. And it may have an order consolidation area where the automated pick gets consolidated with a top-up from in-store. It would be unlikely that the entire SKU or product range would fit inside the back of store micro-fulfillment system. So there'll always be some element, or there's likely to be, some element of in-store picking as a top-up. But the idea of the micro-fulfillment centers is that it would deal with a large percentage, possibly 70 or 80% of the pick operation, making it efficient and fast. The top-up would then happen, reducing that traffic in store for that type of picking, and they come together to form an order. So as you can see from the KPIs on the bottom left, these types of systems are geared towards dealing with as little as 1 to 5,000 orders a day, as little as 5,000 SKUs, and within a footprint of anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 square meters. Again, very much dependent on the availability of space at the back of store. So the retailers need to do a sophisticated network model around their online business. What do they need to do? What do they need to service? And what is the available space? And then all of that comes together to form a micro-fulfillment model. Next slide, please, Daniel. So historically, it's really interesting because I've been in the industry just under 20 years, and the number of times that I've had this conversation, I wish I had a dime for every one of them because I'd be quite rich. Historically, automation has been associated with a lack of flexibility, a lack of modularity, and a lack of scalability. So it was perceived, and it was a real perception. It was a reality which has turned into a perception, and I'll elaborate on that in a little bit. But very much, automation was perceived to be very inflexible, locking an operation into what it's designed to do. And unpredictable business volumes, unpredictable business events could cause it to derail. And if we look at what's happened this year, you can't ask for too much more of an unpredictable outcome to what we're experiencing right now. So the last decade has very much seen a shift in not only the technology and the automation itself, but in the way these systems are being designed. And the systems are being designed in accordance with the evolution of technology and automation in the first place, being designed to be more flexible and scalable. That allows the solution and the system to be designed in a modular, flexible and scalable way. So if we just click again, please, Daniel, what we're seeing now is the convergence of modularity, scalability and flexibility with the productivity that automation provides. So once upon a time, you always got the productivity, but you were fearful of the flexibility that provided. That is now converging together. And by way of example, if we just click to the next slide, please. By way of example, there'll be a few clicks coming through as I go through, Daniel, but this is an example here of a single aisle of multi-shuttle storage. It holds about 3,000 to 4,000 totes of storage, depending on length and height available, and a single pick station. So that picker in that particular station would be picking somewhere around 250, maybe 300 lines an hour. And that's an entry-level system for a goods-to-person picking system. But when we talk about modularity, you add an aisle. So here's an example of where we can add an aisle of storage, and you'll note that we haven't added any throughput. We haven't added any additional picking. So if the requirement of the business becomes that I need more SKUs, quite common, by the way, today when SKU proliferation is dominating a lot of the retail chains and consumer choice is demanding a lot more products to be made available, then you may need to store more product. We Dematic have a technology that allows us to transition those product totes between the aisles of that storage system that you see on the screen. And that means that we can keep one picker there, deliver all the totes into the aisle in front of the picker, and then deliver those totes to that picker for the fulfillment of that order. Just click again, please, Daniel. Again, we've just added another aisle. We've got an aisle on either side of the picking aisle of storage. If you just click again, please. Again, just in the efforts to demonstrate the modularity and scalability of the system. Now we go back to the 2-aisle system, but we've got 2 pick stations now. So we've doubled the storage and we've doubled the throughput of the system. And now we add it again. That goes to 3 plus 3. So we've now added another aisle of storage, another pick station. As the system grows, we may want to add one more click, a dispatch sortation system of some sorts, giving you a fairly comprehensive now order fulfillment, goods to person picking system. So modularity, scalability. In terms of flexibility, again, what's on the screen right now is 3 pick stations, so 3 pickers. So the ability to do somewhere around about 750, maybe 800, 900 order lines an hour in this system in total. But what if your business volumes experience seasonality, or something happens, or you have a low day? Again, we have the flexibility in a system like this to turn off 1 or 2 of those pick stations. So if you only have enough throughput to keep 1 of those pickers busy, turn 2 off, leave 1 pick station on. The technology that I alluded to earlier will transfer the product totes to be in front of that picker, and will deliver all the products that need to be picked to that 1 picker. So you can flex the labor force and accordingly to the volume. And as we grow goods to person systems like this, we can flex that labor force so much more. So for example, the video that I first showed on goods to person, the toll system, that has 24 aisles of multi-shuttle, and that has 24 pick stations. So in terms of being able to deal with a much more varied variability in the throughput, we can flex the number of pickers picking at any point in time from a few right up to 24. And that provides the business loads of flexibility. So again, I loop back to those 3 key words: modularity, flexibility, scalability, being designed into not only the technology to allow it to happen, but the way that the systems are designed and the way the systems are put together. Next slide, please. So this is my last slide, and really is about that discussion around being an early adopter. We've all read various, materials, in the media around consumer adoption of technology, and Australia's pretty up there, right? We're pretty good at adopting technology in general at a consumer level. Historically, we've been less aggressive in the industrial front and in the commercial front. Consumers are good at it, businesses less so. That's a changing landscape now. I think that being an early adopter is about gaining a competitive edge, and it's about getting ahead of your competitors. But being an early adopter comes with its risk. So at the risk of sounding too much like a sales plug, I'm going to use the words choose wisely, choose your partner wisely, because it's really important that you choose a partner that isn't just going to sell you an automated system or a bit of technology. It's about understanding your business, analyzing the supply chain. It's about having those conversations around your business growth and factoring in those business variables and the unpredictability of the business that you can foresee. I mean, we all know that growth projections and business variables is like looking into a crystal ball, but it's nice to put some stakes in the ground. It's nice to establish some baselines of understanding of what the system is capable of doing, and then talk about the flexibility, scalability, modularity of that system to deal with what might come. Solution design and simulation should be part and parcel of any materials handling supplier that you deal with. That should be their core competence, so I won't dwell on that. But if you go through to training and go live and the ability of your partner to support you through the process, not just hand over the keys, but show you how to drive and show you how to optimize and work with you to do that. And then it's not just about the first year of operation, it's about the next 7, 10, maybe 20 years. So again, life cycle support, making sure that you've got someone there for the life of your facility. And if you morph the conversations together around flexibility and being there to support you in the future, those 2 things will go hand in hand, because you may require changes to the system, you may require upgrades, you may require modifications to help deal with a change in the business that you didn't foresee. So all of those things are really important, and they become more important if you're an early adopter, because if you're a late adopter, all those things have been done. They've all been worked through. It's going to work, right? It's easy. But if you're an early adopter, you want to be working with someone that can work with you on all of these aspects. So again, thank you very much for your time. I think we're going to throw over to Daniel for questions now.
Thanks so much, Paz. That was great. That was a really informative session. So thanks so much. And everyone joining in, just want to give you the opportunity now to ask some questions to the panel. As I said before, we have Paz staying with us. We also have Jeffrey and Baz from the Fuzzy Logics team. I know we've had a few questions come through already, so I'll have a quick look at those now. But yeah, as I said, please put any more you have in the question and answers.
I might start with one that was put on, and I'll go to Paz because Baz and I have answered it in the question panel already. Paz, what is your thought on the statement, in a perfect supply chain, the warehouse doesn't exist?
Warehouse doesn't exist.
In a perfect supply chain, the warehouse doesn't exist.
Well,
in other words, they're a necessary evil, right?
Yeah. Look, I think I'm not sure whether that is a reference to micro-fulfillment, because you would argue that a micro-fulfillment center is not a warehouse. So if, in the context of what I talked about with micro-fulfillment, then I would argue that if a retailer chooses to have lots of little automated order fulfillment systems spread around their network, then you don't have a warehouse. And you can organize supply. If it's in the back of a retail store, you can organize supplier deliveries to go straight to that. So you can replenish the consumer pick face at the store, as well as replenishing the automated system. And in that example, you wouldn't have a warehouse. So I think there's scope for micro-fulfillment to play a role in the warehouseless supply chain. But to your point, Jeffrey, I think in a lot of supply chains, the warehouse is a necessary evil. What does it look like? What does it do? That's the things we talked about today.
Yeah, thanks for that. And yeah, like I said, please put more questions in if you have any. Baz, thanks so much for joining us. I've got a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
Obviously, your experience working across the more consultancy, looking at things from the wider view. And does replenishment need to be considered when looking at picking automation?
Well, it's a very simple one. If you don't have stock, you can't pick. So the only way to get stock into a system is to replenish your system efficiently. So yes, you always need to consider replenishment when thinking about automation, and especially from a picking point of view. Getting the right stock in the right location at the right time is always going to be key to be able to fulfill the orders that your customers place on you.
Mm-hmm. And is that about planning initially before you put in any of this automation, or how does this work from someone who's looking to maybe move into automation within their warehouse?
It's probably good to sort of revert back to some of the things that Paz put forward and some of the solutions he put forward. So if you look at sizing a warehouse and sizing an automated solution, the thing that usually drives the size of it is how often you can replenish, how much stock holdings you can keep in there, and a bit of a balance between the cost of storage versus the efficiency itself. So you can put everything you want in automation, it just becomes really expensive. So that then reverts back to saying, well, I've got part in manual storage and part in automated storage, and between the two, I need to replenish bulk stock into a buffer location. So replenishment drives some of the sizing of automation when it comes to designing them at the beginning. And coming back to what we said last session as well, is ongoing to make sure that you keep having the right products in automation is key to keep the machine going. So to get the productivity out of your automation that you originally wanted it to achieve, you're going to have to continuously monitor and control what type of product you put in, the quantities you put in, and when you put it in. So especially things like fashion retail and tolls, a classic example of that is you get seasons. So right now we're in wintertime. There's no point having something in there that's geared towards summertime, because summer doesn't start for another couple of months. Mm-hmm. At the same time, once you get to summertime, you want to get the winter product out and get the summer product in, which is basically replenishment. It's all about managing the right product into automation at the right time.
Yeah, can I chime in there? Baz, that is an absolute key insight, right? So I can design you the most incredibly productive, fast, sophisticated order fulfillment system that brings products out and allows pickers to pick it, 1,000+ units per hour. But if you don't have the product in the engine that delivers those product totes to a picker in the first place, that system ain't going to work for you. That inventory management, everything that Baz just said, that the system itself is reliant on proper inventory management, order management, visibility, knowing what product needs to be in the automation.
Mm. And that's
I think back to, sorry, Danny.
No.
Just to jump in, because I think that's where a lot of businesses sort of go wrong, is they tend to think about automation as sort of the end all game, and it's the magic solution that's going to fix everything for me. And a lot of people forget that it's not just a black box you just switch on and it just runs, in perpetuity. It's something you have to manage constantly to make sure it's running at its peak performance.
Great. So we have a question here. We have a couple here from Imtiaz. Will multi-story warehouses, DCs, help in reducing overall cost for a business as they are utilizing the space effectively? Paz, do you want to take that one?
Interesting question. Yeah. So we do see lots of examples in the Asian and Southeast Asian market that we operate in of multi-story warehouses, made up of 3-4 levels of concrete building mezzanines and the system spread out in a very small footprint, but utilizing the height. So yes, absolutely. But largely premised on the fact that will apply only when land is at a premium and unavailable. I think if land is available, it's always going to be cheaper for a business not to have to build a multi-story warehouse. I mean, that's just building costs kind of 101, and I'm not a builder and I'm not an expert, but I think it's a driver to go to multi-story warehouses where the cost of land is prohibitive, where the availability of land is prohibitive. But I think to answer the question, if you've got no choice, you will. But I don't think that it's going to be any cheaper to do it if you have the choice to build a single, ground floor based warehouse.
Yeah, and I guess that leads into quite an interesting question then for you again, Paz. When you're looking at a new build, for example, what are the key drivers when choosing which automation to go for? Obviously, I imagine a lot of customers would like to see robotic picking, but does that always make sense?
No, it doesn't always make sense. Not, there isn't any one piece of technology or automation that always makes sense. I mean, the golden chalice here is ROI, right? So what is going to give the customer a return on that investment? And there are a number of variables that contribute to the calculation of an ROI. So labor, productivity, and there's a whole bunch of other intangible benefits that finance people would like to put a value on. So first of all, we need to look at all the variables affecting the technology. So with respect to your question and the context of robotic picking, the product range, is it suitable for robotic picking? How do you pick an order? Does the robot need to really carefully pick up an item and then place it in a tote, which then slows it down? So a lot of these variables that then affect the performance and the design of the system need to be considered first. And then they input into an ROI. So am I getting enough performance out of the robot to be able to run it for 2 shifts to get me the return on that investment? And if the answer to a lot of these questions, when you look at the analysis, is yes, then yeah, it might make sense to do that. But there would be, lots of applications where that's not the case. And automation doesn't always justify. Again, volume of business, style of business, it should not be viewed as a given. It should be viewed as something to be worked through, right? Let's work through it together. So a lot of the work that we do with our customers is, up front, we've got to understand the business, get to know the product range, get to know the business, get to know the drivers, the deliverables, pull all that together into what we think might work as a solution and as an application of automation technology, and then start to work with the customer on what does that look like financially? Does it actually make sense to do that? So there's absolutely no one answer fits all, and there's absolutely no givens that automation will always justify.
Yeah, of course. And Baz, over to you. So when you're working with clients, when you're initially looking at something, how do you determine what the baseline of productivity for an operation should be?
Look, it's almost similar to budgeting for your own household. So you basically start with an analysis of data. So how much goes in, how much goes out, how much stock do I need to hold, how much do I think I'm going to grow as a business, who are my competitors, what are my service level agreements, to pay this presentation. If my customers are expecting same day delivery and today I'm giving them 2-day delivery, then that's a driver for at least some form of improvement. And what we tend to do is we take a bottom-up approach. So to Paz's point, not everyone's operation is actually able to be automated. Look, you can automate anything if you've got time and money, but there has to be a return on investment. If a automation system does not stack up, then you need to do it is to stick with manual, just make the manual more efficient. And usually what we do is like a bottom-up approach. So we start with the smallest type of automation that will make sense. Does that stack up? Great, let's move a step up. And then if you look around the industry, Automatic's the biggest one in the country in terms of automated solutions and in terms of just in general logistics solutions as a whole. There are other vendors, and sorry if I have to say this out loud, but there are certain things that Automatic won't be able to do that other people could be able to do, which would still solve the problem for them.
Apart from asking Baz to wash his mouth out with soap and water after saying that. Just joking. Look, absolutely. Really important to understand that there's a range of technologies on the market. I think it's really important for potential purchasers of automation to look at those options. But I made the point at the end of my presentation. It can be, and I say this with a lot of respect to a lot of people who have to make these decisions, it can be less about the choice of the automation technology and more about the partner you choose to work with.
Correct. In the end, then this is a good one to pay. So we always tell people that in the end, it doesn't matter what solution you choose if you've got a choice of many. It is the people you have to work with long term. It's like a marriage. So if you decide to go for a type of solution, and there's multiple partners available in the market, choose the one that you feel most comfortable with, the one that you have the best cultural fit with, the one that you think is best suited to implement your solution, and the one you want to basically long-term, I'll always call it stay in bed with, and keep that relationship going. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, you don't have to wash your mouth out.
You have the best solution in the world with the worst provider, which will never work. You can have the worst solution in the world with the best provider, and it will still work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Fantastic. And that's why we need good analysts and good consultants, which is thank you for that. I just want to ask one last question to you all. Actually, I think Imitaz has actually been quite a loyal supporter of these webinars, so it's nice for you to put these insights. Just a bit of an insight into how you all got into this as an industry, and how you would really suggest someone else to do the same. What are good courses to do? How would they study this and get into this as an industry?
Well, I think if I could jump in, I think Paz, you guys have a couple of job openings right now for logistics consultants and data analysts and things, because everyone's extremely busy before you jump it. So I don't think there is a specific course you can follow to get into the industry in terms of automation. There are certain basic things you can do. So you'll find a lot of people in the industry started out as like a mechanical engineer or a logistics engineer or some form of a background in at least supply chain logistics or some form of mechanization. And then from there, once you get into a base level of whether it's data analytics or mechatronics or something similar, you sort of tend to grow into it. It just depends in the end where you want to go. It's not necessarily how you end up in automation. It's where do you want to be at the end of your career. Yeah. Paz, feel free to jump in.
No, I think you covered it pretty well, Baz. I agree a lot with everything you just said. I think people, my experience, as I said, I've been in the industry now for just under 20 years. A lot of people that are in this industry kind of fell into it. They came through a background, as Baz says, for engineering and all that. They kind of fall into it. One of the things that I've learned in the industry is that it's tough. It's a really niche set of knowledge that you need, and it's hard. And that initial learning curve is quite rampant and large. But once you get past that, it's an industry that continues to reward. It remains challenging through your career. No 2 days are ever the same. I think that's a fantastic thing for anybody to ever say in their workplace. And I'm really proud to say that. I think it's a bad day if I go home on any day and I haven't learned something new that day. I think that's the nature of this industry. So, I think certainly engineering backgrounds tend to be a bit of the norm, but that's in terms of that upfront consulting and solutions design, etc. We employed project managers from various backgrounds to be able to deliver projects as well. And the industry obviously supports all the other business admin functions that are required in any business. But there's no one course. But I think if you see an opening in the industry and if you think it's something that looks attractive, I'd say go for it.
Fantastic.
I think, yeah, just be keen. I think all the people that we've... Sorry, Jeff, go for it.
Yeah, sorry, if I could add my 2 cents on it as well. I feel like one of the things that can be very helpful to building a career in this is deciding what you're going to focus on, because supply chain can be very broad term. But what we do, specifically what we've been talking about in these seminars, is inside the warehouse. It's called intralogistics because it's all happening inside those 4 walls. There's people that specialize inside the 4 walls. There's people that specialize outside. There's transport, there's freight. Choose your niche, and there's heaps of resources online. And there was a question about, you know, what do we think about Amazon moving into Australia and bringing all this new technology? It's a wake-up call to everyone that's not using technology to optimize their operations, that they need to be, because that's what customers expect. As Paz said, the customer is king. It's all about the ultimate client fulfillment experience. And yeah, it's just about having that passion and just, yeah, lots of videos and lots of resources online.
Absolutely. And that's a great point to wrap up on. I think it's been a really great session. So just want to thank everyone for joining. Jeff, Baz from the Fuzzy Logics team, and a very big thanks to you, Paz, for joining, and a great series from you. Next week, 2 weeks time, we'll be back again for the session 7, which will be around packing, and we'll be joined by Cohesio for that session. So please join again in a couple of weeks time, and we look forward to seeing you then. Have a great week and take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.